Good morning, good afternoon, and good night. I'm KT, and this is what happened. Tonight's Bible story is a story of an unbelievable betrayal. It's a story of survival and never giving up, and it is a story about a remarkable rise to the top. That's right, tonight we're doing part 2 in our series, Is This the Worst Family in the Bible? And we're going to tell the story of Joseph. So sit back, relax, because we're going straight into part 1. And it's going to be called Hate Grows. Now, I'm going to link part 1 at the end of this video, and it is the story of Joseph's father, Jacob, and his brother Esau. Just click that video and tune in if you'd like to see that story. At the time that we're starting out, Joseph is 17 years old. It's his father, Jacob, who is also now known as Israel's favorite. And that is because his mother was his favorite wife. One day, Joseph was out feeding the flocks, and his brothers weren't really doing the work the way he thought they should be doing it. So he went back and he told his father, hey, my brothers aren't really doing a good job. Israel loved Joseph the most, and he actually made him a tunic of many colors. This also perturbed his 11 other brothers. Jacob had 12 sons, but he made one tunic. Add in that Joseph was being the ops. The brothers didn't like him because he was their dad's favorite most of all, but they also didn't like the way he carried himself. And I'm not saying he was wrong. I'm just saying he was a kid and his brothers hated him. We already talked about Joseph getting this tunic or coat of many colors. We talked about Joseph being the ops. Like, Joseph is out here snitching in these streets. Like, father, they ain't doing their work. On top of that, every time he breathed, the brothers, they liked him less and less. Just from being, right? If you thought it couldn't get worse, Joseph had a dream. He actually had 2 dreams, but let's talk about the first one. Joseph had a dream that he and his brothers were all in a field binding sheaves. Now, that would be like a bundle of stalks, is the best way I can describe it. So they were binding it. All of a sudden, his bundle of stalks rose up higher than his brothers. His brothers' stalks all stood up, and then they bowed down to his bundle of stalks that was in the center. Joseph had this dream, no harm, no foul, except he went and told all of his brothers about the dream. And you can only guess what happened. His brothers immediately were like, so you're saying we're gonna bow down to you? You're gonna reign over us, right? You're gonna rule us? Most of his brothers were older than him. So here's your younger brother saying, yeah, y'all are gonna bow down to me. And so they hated him even more. I mean, the hate just grows. Joseph had another dream. In this dream, Joseph was himself, I believe. And then there was the sun and the moon and 11 stars. And the sun, the moon, and all 11 stars bowed down to Joseph. So the sun and the moon were representing his father and his mother, and then the stars were his brothers. So even his father, who loved him the most and showed a lot of favoritism with him, he even got upset at Joseph about this dream. And he asked him, he said, what kind of dream is this that you're dreaming? You're saying that your mother and I and all your brothers are going to be bowing down to you? And to Joseph's defense, Joseph, he was just relaying the dream that he had, even if it may not have been smart to share it. He's a 17-year-old, right? His brothers got angrier. They started to plot and plan. They said, we got to do something. But his father forgave him for speaking about this dream and continued to love him. At one point, the brothers are taking their father's flock to Shechem. At some point, their father, Israel, says, Joseph, because he stayed behind, I need you to go check on your brothers. I need you to go to Shechem and see what they're up to. So he was on the way. He found a man, and the man is like, what are you doing? I'm looking for my brothers. So he takes him to them. His brothers saw him from far away. They said mockingly, oh, look, the dreamer is coming. They started to plot. They were like, you know what? He's by himself. Father isn't with him. We should take him out and get rid of him. We wouldn't have to deal with him anymore. We wouldn't have to listen to his dreams. We wouldn't have to look at him anymore. Out of all his brothers, I won't say his brother Reuben really liked Joseph probably any more than the other brothers, but he did respect their father, and he loved their father, and he worried about their father, and he knew that Joseph was their father's favorite, and he didn't want to hurt Joseph. He quickly said, no, let's not do that. There's a pit over there. Let's just put him down in the pit, and then we can kind of figure out what to do with him over the next few days or so. And the brothers agreed to this. When he got close enough to them, they grabbed him, they threw him in the pit. The pit had no water, no food, and that's how they left him in that pit at 17 years old. So they had to be scary. And before they threw him in, they stripped off his tunic, what they refer to in present day as his coat of many colors. So once they had their brother in the pit with no food, no water, and no tunic, so half naked, they sat down and ate. They ate a good meal. At some point, the brothers look up and they see some Ishmaelites, and they were from Gilead on their camels. They were bringing like spices. They were traders of some kind. kind. Judah was one of the older of the oldest brothers, and when he saw the Ishmaelites, he was like, you know what? Reuben is right. Why should we harm Joseph? There's no profit in that. We could actually sell him. We could make some money, basically. The other brothers readily agreed to this. They were like, yeah. And so they went and approached the Ishmaelites, and they said, hey, we want to sell you this slave. And the Ishmaelites said, well, why would you want to sell us this slave? What's wrong with them? It's nothing wrong with them. He's our brother, and we just don't want the guilt of having harmed him with our own hands. So we just want to sell him to you. They agreed. They gave them 20 shekels of silver for their brother Joseph. Now, I won't pretend that I was able to figure out how much 20 shekels of silver was, but in today's money, it's worth like $6 US. It was pure silver back then. But the brothers split that money up and bid farewell to their brother, and that was it. Now, Reuben was not with them at this time. Reuben came back to the pit and didn't see Joseph there. He was like, where is our brother? Where is he? And they're like, oh, we sold him. And here's your cut of the money, by the way, because we're honest people. We're honest people. Here's your cut of the 20 shekels. And Reuben said, are y'all stupid? What am I supposed to do? We don't have Joseph. We got to go back home. What am I going to tell our father? And they said, oh, don't worry about it. We got his tunic. They slaughtered a goat baby, a kid goat. They put his blood all over the tunic. And they then took it home, which was a whole different level of cruelty. Despite Jacob displaying horrible parenting and not being able to not show extreme levels of favoritism, it was particularly cruel because they brought the tunic back to him. It's not funny, y'all, but this they said, is this your son's tunic? Does this belong to your son, Joseph? And he's like, oh my gosh, that's my son Joseph's tunic. Surely a wild beast has killed him. And he grieved. He even said, I will go into the grave with my son. That's what I'm going to do. In the meantime, Joseph has now been sold to the Midianites. They have sold him to Potiphar, which is the officer of Pharaoh and captain of the guard. We'll be right back with part 2. Part 2 is called Finding Favor. Now Joseph is in Potiphar's house, and Joseph has favor with the Lord. Because of this, he is where Joseph is. So Joseph is in Potiphar's house, and now Potiphar's house is thriving. See how those connections work? At this time, Potiphar makes Joseph the overseer of his entire house. He trusted him so much that he did not look over the things that Joseph did. The Bible even says specifically that the only thing that Potiphar knew of what Joseph was doing was the bread that he put in front of him. So as long as he was getting his food, he trusted Joseph, and Joseph had earned that trustworthiness. The other thing you need to know about Joseph is that Joseph was fine. The Bible says that Joseph was fine in form and appearance. He looked cute and his body was tea. People noticed, and it wouldn't have mattered, but the person who noticed the most was Potiphar's wife. In my version of the Bible, she does not have a name, but Potiphar's wife starts to come on to Joseph. And when I say come on to him, it wasn't subtle. She's like, Joseph, come lie with me. And Joseph told her, and I love this response. Joseph said, my master has held nothing back from me. He has given me access to everything in this house. Not only access, I run it. In my master's house, there is no one greater than me. He has held nothing back from me except for you, because you are his wife. How then could I go behind his back and do a great wickedness and betray him like that? I'm not finna creep with you, lady. This man has lifted me up and given me everything. He doesn't treat me like a slave. Why would I betray him? And on the side note, why would I jeopardize that for you? He didn't say that, but what he did say is I wouldn't betray him. You would think that would be the end of it, but no. It went on. His wife continued to come on to Joseph, and Joseph would just tell her no. He would try not to be alone in the room with her. But alas, one night comes where she does not have her men around, and that would be like her guards, and there's no one there, and he walks into the room. So he went into the room to do his work, and she caught him there alone. She told him, lie with me, and he turned to run out of the room because he knew, I don't want to be in this compromising position with her. There's no one here to be a witness for me. But she grabbed him by his clothes. She pulled, and he kept running, and it pulled off of him. And when it happened, I think she immediately got nervous, and baby, she turned into like a 1950s Karen. And she immediately was like, oh, he tried to get me. Oh, help me, help me, help me. Baby, the guards came running in, and she had this whole story made up about how he tried to force her to lie with him. And she's like, you know, he tried to force me, but you heard me. I cried out with a loud voice. He ran, but I still got this because he left this behind. Baby, the lies. The guards went and got their master Potiphar, and he said, who did this to you? And she said, oh, your servant, Joseph. Yeah, he did this. Now, I imagine he probably wanted to give her the side eye, right? Please. slaves, but that was his wife, and this was a servant or slave, so he was going to choose her side. He had to. He took him and he put him in the prison. He didn't just put him in any prison, he put him in the king's prison. But here's the common theme. The Lord was with Joseph everywhere he went, so he was with him in the prison. The prison overseer, he actually liked Joseph, and Joseph found favor with him, and so he lifted him up as far as he could in the prison, and he made him the keeper of the prison. That's crazy, right, y'all? In this position, the keeper or the overseer, he didn't look into anything Joseph did. He was in charge of the prisoners, the grounds, everything around it. He organized the prison. Just like with Potiphar, he had free reign inside of that prison. Let's go back to why it's important that he's in the king's prison. It's important because eventually the king gets mad at his baker and his butler, and he tosses them both into the prison. And it's messed up, but Joseph would be in charge of them. At some point, both of the men are in the prison, and they both had a dream on the same night. They didn't understand the dreams. Joseph noticed they were acting different, and he asked them both in turn, what's wrong? Why do you look so sad? They both said, hey, we had dreams. We've been talking about it, but we don't understand the interpretation. Like, what do these dreams mean? The butler went first, and Joseph said, look, the interpretations of dreams come from God, so tell them to me, and maybe God will speak them. So the chief butler says, hey, when I was dreaming, there was a vine in front of me. And in the vine, there were 3 branches. Then it budded and the blossoms shot forth out of the branches. Out of those, there were ripe grapes that came from them. Then he said the Pharaoh's cup was in his hand, and he took the grapes and pressed them into the cup. And then he gave the cup back to Pharaoh in his hand. So Joseph said the 3 vines are 3 days. And in 3 days, the Pharaoh will lift you up, and he will restore you to your place as his butler. When he does, you're going to put Pharaoh's cup into his hand because that was ceremonial, I believe. And then you will officially be his butler again. So the chief baker was like, this sounds like a good interpretation. Interpret mine. He says in his dream, there were 3 baskets on top of his head. In the top basket, there were all kinds of baked goods for Pharaoh, but some birds came out of the sky and started to eat at the breads and the baked goods. So Joseph said again, the 3 baskets are 3 days for you too. In 3 days, Pharaoh will send for you, and he will bring you out of the prison, but then he will remove your head and hang you from the tree. The chief butler said, thank you for interpreting this for me. He said, you're welcome, but how you can repay me is just don't forget about me. Tell Pharaoh about me because I really want to get out of this prison. It was true. It came to pass. The Pharaoh's birthday came, and he got both the butler and the baker out. So the butler was restored, but the baker's head was removed and he was hung from a tree. With that, we will go to part 3. Part 3 is called Delivered by Dreams. So more time went by, and guess what? The chief butler forgot about Joseph. But Pharaoh had a dream, and in the dream he stood by a river, and up from the river came 7 fat cows, and right behind them came 7 skinny, sickly looking cows. But when they came out of the water, they gobbled up the fat cows, but after they ate them, they still looked skinny and sickly. This disturbed Pharaoh out of his sleep. He woke up, and eventually he went back to sleep, and he had a second dream. In the second dream, there were 7 heads of grain, and they looked healthy and fat and thick, but then 7 sickly heads of grain came up behind them, and they consumed them, yet they still looked sickly and weak. So at this point, Pharaoh woke back up, and it was truly disturbing. He actually sent for all the magicians. He was like, bring me all the magicians. I need somebody to interpret this dream. However, they couldn't. They didn't know what it meant. They all told him they had no clue. And that is when the chief butler said, Pharaoh, oh my goodness, I completely forgot this guy named Joseph in the prison. He interpreted my dream that said you would lift me back up and place me here, and it came true, and also that you would not forgive the baker. And that was true. Pharaoh said, bring this man to me immediately. So they go and they get Joseph out of the prison. You know, you can't just go up to the Pharaoh any kind of way, baby. So they bathed him, shaved him, put him in some fresh clothes, and took him to Pharaoh. When Joseph gets to Pharaoh, Pharaoh says, I heard you interpret dreams. And Joseph said, oh no, that's God. Pharaoh tells him the dream, and he said, oh, your dreams are the same. The 7 fat cows and the 7 plump heads of grain are actually 7 years. And these are years of prosperity and plenty of food and abundance. However, the 7 skinny, ugly cows and the 7 sickly stalks of grain are 7 years of famish and hunger. Joseph told him, God has showed you, Pharaoh, what he's about to do. God is giving you this so that you can plan what you're going to do. I would suggest selecting a wise man to manage things for Egypt so that you can be ready for this famine. Pharaoh asked the people around him because the magicians are still there. He's like, hey, who could be this wise man? And the people kind of start having discussions. And then Pharaoh says, you know what? We've got the wise man. I don't think there's anyone wiser than Joseph here. He was able to interpret the dream. He's able to tell us we need a wise man. Let's go with him. I'm sure Joseph had to be stunned a little bit. I don't know. He was faithful, but I would have still been stunned. Pharaoh told him, you're going to be over my house. You're going to be over my people. You're going to be over Egypt. He then took his signet ring off because, there was like that little stamp ring. It was important. He took it off and he gave it to Joseph. He gave him the finest clothes. He then put a gold chain around his neck. And baby, when they give you the chain, you in there. Pharaoh had a chariot. He put Joseph in the second chariot and he rode him out. And he said, hey, bow to Joseph. Once they were bowed down to their knee, Pharaoh said, I am Pharaoh. And without Joseph's consent, no man can lift his hand or foot in Egypt. And he also gave him a new name. From now on, instead of Joseph, your name will be Zephnath-Paneah. And he gave him a wife too, Asnath. Let me tell you who this wife was. There was a high priest. His name was Potipharah, and this was the priest's daughter. So even that was a selected pick to show the favor that he had in Joseph. You may wonder, how long was this? Joseph was 30 years old when he was lifted to this position. He had been a slave and then a prisoner for a total of 13 years. Now, we were in the plentiful years, so Joseph immediately went about his job of gathering excess grain. At first, the plan was to take a fifth of the grain, but the 7 years were so good that he was able to take a lot more. To the point that once they reached their goal, Joseph continued to collect excess grain and he stopped counting. It wasn't even a concern anymore, and they put him into the giant grain stores. True to his interpretation, the 7 years were followed by 7 years of famine, but the Bible says this famine was bigger than Egypt, that it affected the world. So Joseph was giving the grain to the Egyptians, and then he started to sell the grain to the other nations. They were showing up for grain, he was selling it because they had more than enough for the Egyptian people for the 7 years. They could afford to make money and sell this grain to other people. This leads us into part 4. Part 4 is called Full Circle. Leading up to the time of the famine, Joseph and his wife had 2 sons. So when the famine came, people were coming from everywhere to buy grain. One day, Joseph's brothers had come to buy grain for their families and their father Jacob. They found themselves bowed down before Joseph to buy grain. There were only 10 of Joseph's brothers. Because of what Jacob thought had happened to Joseph, he would not let his youngest son Benjamin go with his 10 brothers. Benjamin was Joseph's full brother. That was his mother's son as well. Joseph had to be stunned to see them bow before him requesting grain. He immediately recognized them, but they did not know who Joseph was. Also, Joseph used an interpreter to talk to his brothers, so they did not know that he could speak and understand their language. When he saw them, he started questioning them. He accused them of being spies. And the brothers immediately said, no, we are not. We are just coming to buy grain because we're hungry. Joseph asked them all types of questions. Who is your father? How many brothers do you have? Reuben said, there are 10 of us present. Our youngest brother is at home with our father. And so Joseph again said, you're spies. You're here to see what's in our land. And they said, no, we're just honest men. We're just trying to buy grain. And so Joseph said, well, prove it. You said there is another brother. I want you to leave one of you behind. You bring me back this other brother, and then I will believe that you're honest men. They told him, we can't bring him because our father will not let us bring him. Joseph said, well, I'm going to keep this brother, and it was Simeon. If you don't come back with the other brother, then you don't. But if you do come back and you need more grain, you will pay with your lives if you do not come back with their youngest brother. Keep in mind, the brothers did not know that there was going to be 7 years of famine. They think we'll buy grain until things get better. So the brothers went home, but before they left, Joseph had his servants to put the money that they paid for the grain back in their bags. As they were departing and loading up their donkeys, one of the brothers' bag fell open and he noticed the money. He's like, oh my gosh, the money is still here. They didn't take it. And he was afraid because what if they think we're stealing? They already think we're spies. And they just make the long trek home. When they get home and their father asked them how it goes, well, father, we've got grain. And this is what happened. When they opened their bags, they found out that they all had their money. So then they were really afraid. And they told their father, we had to leave Simeon and we need to take Benjamin so that we can get Simeon back. And their daddy said, absolutely not. You already lost one of my kids. Remember that? My favorite one? You lost him. And I grieved and I'm still grieving. And you are not taking my other favorite son. And you done lost Simeon too, because let's not forget him. Jacob was like, you left 10 and you came back 9. Reuben said, look, father, I've got sons. Let me take Benjamin to get Simeon back. You can have my sons. And if I don't bring Simeon back and Benjamin back, then you got my sons. You can do what you need to do to them. But their daddy was like, boy, y'all think I'm stupid. Y'all done lost 2 of my kids in 2 trips. Yeah, they were 13 years apart, but still, you ain't supposed to be losing my son. So no. They proceeded to go about life as normal. They ate and ate and the grain ran out. Their father Jacob said, okay, y'all need to go get us some more grain. Reuben was like, let me tell you, we ain't going back to Egypt. The man was clear. If we come back and we don't have our youngest brother with us, then we don't come back alive. If you're going to send Benjamin, then I will go get you some grain, father. And baby Jacob was stubborn about this, and I really can't blame him. He was like, I'm not giving you Benjamin, and you gonna go get us some food because we hungry. And they said, nope, Reuben said, I ain't doing that. You're not sending me to my death. He gave in. He said, look, I don't know what you did to this man, but take some spices. Oh, we got honey and almonds. Take that. Take all of that stuff. Give it as a gift to him. Tell him we just want to buy grain, and you can take Benjamin too. They load everything up. They take everything, and they end up back before Joseph, who they still don't know is their brother. When Joseph saw them with Benjamin, he was like, is this your brother? Yes, this is our brother. Joseph immediately got emotional because these were his brothers that sold him, but his baby brother had been a baby when he left, and this was the only other piece of his mother that he has. So he had to step out of the room. He cried, he washed his face, and he went back. He said, look, we're going to eat, and let's sit down and eat, and then I'll get you your grain and you can be on your way. But Joseph had another test for his brothers. He's still using an interpreter to talk to them. They had to eat separately because the Egyptians would not eat with the Hebrews because it was like an affront to them. Joseph actually gave them food from his table, and the brothers were kind of shocked. The brothers also noticed that Benjamin's serving was 5 times as much as their serving. So they drank and were merry. Everybody was happy during this meal. So when they got ready to go, Joseph told his servants, look, load all their bags up, fill them to the max with grain. I'm going to send them with their money again. In addition, the youngest brother Benjamin put his money, but also put my silver cup that I drink from in his bag. And so the brothers loaded up and they started to leave. Joseph told his men, follow them. And when they get towards the edge, I guess, of the city, stop them and tell them, hey, you stole from my master. And they did. They followed this plan. And they stopped them and they said, you repay our master by stealing from him after all he's done for you all. And they said, look, why would we steal from him? Y'all gave us the money last time and we bought it back. So why would we steal anything? Well, we're going to go through your bags. And they did. When they got to Benjamin's bag, of course, the silver chalice was there. They took him all back to Joseph. Joseph accused him of the same thing. Like, okay, that's fine. Well, he's going to stay here. He'll be my prisoner and my servant, and you all can go. And this was the test. This time Judah came forward. Judah said, oh no, master. You cannot take our brother. We have to take him home. You will kill our father. You will turn his hair silver. He will go. He said, it doesn't matter. He stole. He's staying. You can go. And they said, you don't understand. They start to speak in their language and they're talking about, we already did this to our other brother. We sold him and we told our father he was dead. It's an argument because Reuben's like, I told y'all shouldn't have done that. See, now it's all coming back on us. Now if we don't go home with Benjamin, our father's going to die and it's going to be on us. They didn't know that Joseph could understand them because he's still using an interpreter. So they go back and they say, look, if I don't go back, like, these are the consequences and we cannot do this to our father. Judah said, take me. And you got to remember, Judah was the ringleader who was leading the way to sell Joseph into slavery. Well, at this point, Joseph was losing it. So he sent all the Egyptians away, all his servants, and he started to cry out loudly. He said, I'm Joseph. I'm your brother that you sold into slavery. And the brothers were flabbergasted, to say the least. They could not believe it. I can't even think of how that conversation would go. What? Our brother we sold? Oh, you like Pharaoh's number 2, like you're over the land in charge of our food and well-being. Oops. But Joseph told them, don't be upset, don't be scared, don't be grieved. I realize now, 13 years later, that you didn't send me here. God sent me here to save the land. I was gonna say save the world because essentially he did for that portion. The people would have starved. They wouldn't have known to save the food. They wouldn't have known any of these things. And he's like, look, is my father alive? They confirmed that he was. Joseph hugged his brother Benjamin's neck first and cried on him. And then he really shocked the other brothers because he kissed each brother and he told them, go get my father, go get your families, your kids, your wives, get your flocks. I'm going to move you closer to me. We have 5 more years of famine. And if you're going to buy grain, you're going to be poor and broken in poverty. I don't want that for you. I want to see my father because I can't believe he's still alive. His mother wasn't anymore. And take these camels. I'm going to fill them with stuff. He even gave each of the brothers a new garment to wear. But Benjamin, he gave 5 garments and 300 pieces of silver. So the brothers went back to their father, Israel or Jacob, and they said, Father, you're never going to believe it. Joseph is alive and he is over Egypt. He's in charge of the food, the everything, the land. He's going to give us land and he wants us to come move there. Jacob was like, shut your mouth. You're lying. I ain't seeing my son. So once they really told their father what had happened and all that Joseph had said and showed him the carts of all the gifts he sent, Jacob said, that's enough for me. I believe it. Let's go. I want to see my son. And they packed up and they left. When Joseph broke down crying earlier before his brothers left, Pharaoh's house heard it and it got back to Pharaoh. And Pharaoh was so happy that he had found his brothers and he told him, yeah, tell him to come here and I'm going to give him the best land in Egypt. Now, Jacob, his 11 sons and their families, they are on their way to Egypt to move and relocate. They have their flocks, all their belongings, and they are on the road. Sure enough, they make it. Joseph and Jacob are reunited. And listen, it doesn't matter what his parenting style was. This had to be a happy and unbelievable reunion. You would think after 13 years, you would never see a relative again because they've been missing and gone. Joseph introduces his sons to his father. Jacob and Joseph, they hug each other, they cry, they weep. And Jacob says to Joseph, now let me die. I have seen your face. That's Jacob saying, I don't need anything else in his life. If I go today, I'm happy. Joseph keeps his word. Pharaoh keeps his word. They settle his families in the land of Egypt so that they can live through this famine. They get them set up on the land, get them situated. Now, Jacob did make Joseph promise him something. He said, if I die here, you promise me that you will take me out of the land of Egypt and you bury me in our lands. Put me in the lands of my fathers. Another important thing that happened is that Jacob blessed Joseph's sons. And we know how important that is to get that blessing for your children. So he was able to bless his grandchildren, Jacob was. But when Jacob was blessing Joseph's son, he put his right hand on the youngest son's head, which means that's for the older son's blessing. Joseph had learned something from Jacob's story. He said, oh no, father, this is my oldest son. He gets the blessing first. And he said, truly, they will both be great, but this is how this is supposed to be. And he felt like that's what God was telling him to do, even though it's interesting to me because this is what happened with you, Jacob, but okay. After that, Jacob met with all his sons. That I won't get into because as we do other parts to Is This the Worst Family in the Bible? We will talk about the brothers because some of their stories are wild. We'll get into the blessings in those stories. Jacob's words to his sons were ruthless, but I'm going to tell you what he said to Joseph because this is Joseph's story. Basically, he describes Joseph as a well of strength and how people attacked him, but he kept climbing. He had surpassed his forefathers and that the blessings of his forefathers were upon him. When Jacob finished his last word, he pulled his knees up onto the bed, took his last breath, and he left the earth. Joseph wept over his father. The mourning period was 40 days for them. However, the Egyptian mourning period was 70 days, and they did mourn for him out of respect for Joseph. When that time was up, he did get Pharaoh's permission, and he took his father to the land of his fathers to bury him. Once their father had passed, his brothers at some point realized, like, oh my gosh, so they fell upon their knees and bowed down to Joseph and said, we are your servants. Joseph said, don't be afraid. But as for you, you meant evil against me, but God meant it for good, in order to bring it about as it is this day, to save many people alive. He told his brothers, I'm going to provide for you and your children. Joseph lived his life out in Egypt. He lived to be 110 years old. Joseph said, I am dying. Surely God will visit you to lead you out of Egypt back to the land where he felt like they should be. And he said, when you do, you take my bones and you take them there too, because he wanted to be buried in the land of his forefathers as well. And that's Joseph's story. So let's get into my final thoughts. As I go into part 5, my final thoughts, there are so many ties to this story. Number 1, hate, I believe, can build faster than love. Joseph's brothers hated him, and it led them to do something really drastic. The very first time I ever heard this story, I really thought they were going to get rid of him. What they did was bad and maybe even worse on the front end. Just imagine being 17, sold into slavery. I don't know what you would do in that situation. It kind of reminds me of Harriet Tubman's story, which you can check out on the channel. Joseph learned a new land, learned a new language, learned new people, and was very impressive. He quickly rose to the top, and the blessings went everywhere that he went. Once you realize that, then you realize it didn't matter how tough the situation Joseph was in. He was going to rise to the top regardless. It doesn't diminish the journey that it took him to get there, but I think his story can reflect to each person that that we can survive hard things, we can do hard things, and we don't just have to survive it, we can actually thrive and blossom. Everyone that we cover on this channel, whether it be a history or a Bible story, it has a similar thread. The other message is be careful how you treat other people, because Joseph's brothers sold him and most of them never thought twice about it. They thought they were rid of him. They never knew that not only would they be before him, that his dreams would come true, they didn't know that he would be over the entirety of Egypt. They also were dependent on him for their actual livelihood, for food, and he held their lives in his hands because he could make the decision to not honor that he was their brother, just like they didn't honor that he was their brother. Joseph took a high road, which is the next lesson. He decided that he was going to forgive them. I don't even know if it was so much because he thought they deserved forgiveness. It was because he knew that their actions put him where he needed to be. And if he hadn't have been there to interpret that dream, nobody would have interpreted that dream. Imagine how many people would have starved and not been there if it hadn't have been for Joseph being in the wrong place at the right time. If that makes any sense, right? Because he shouldn't have been in the prison. It was the wrong place, but it was the right time. Yeah, I can't wait to get to part 3. We're gonna go through some of these brothers. But baby, Jacob read them the riot act. I'm talking about he ate down and showed out when he talked to his sons. But also, I don't know if he took responsibility for the part that he played. He definitely couldn't take accountability for their actions, especially as adults, but he definitely played a part in their childhood and how they were formed and shaped. It led to decisions that they made. It played a part. If I had to pick one overarching goal, is that this story tells us that the impossible is possible. It's a story that is meant to uplift you and to take you through those hard times, to show you that, hey, you can go through hard times and it doesn't mean you're stuck there. That's what I always take from Joseph's story. It's one of my favorites. Esther is my favorite. Y'all know that. Every time I read this story, it's truly captivating to me. So I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you got something good from it. Tell me in the comments. And until next time, keep learning, be happy, and always have a blessed day. Bye bye.